everyone, and welcome to the special broadcast. Any moment now, first visuals of the meeting with Michael Waltz calling on Prime Minister Modi will appear. He is the National Security Advisor of the new Donald Trump administration. Waltz will be the second most critical intelligence official to meet Mr. Modi after Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard met Prime Minister Modi within hours of his arrival at Washington, D.C. That's the big highlight of this hour. Hello viewers, I'm Maria Shakil. We'll be joined by Nikunj Garg. Shortly, we are covering the big dialogue of democracies with US President and Prime Minister Modi meeting at Washington, D.C. Prime Minister Modi's key priority is likely to be a preemptive move in which he hopes that punitive trade action by Washington against India will not be there. The question really is, can India-US move beyond irritants to matters of convergences from technology to defense to energy? Let me go straight to our senior managing editor, Nikunj Garg, who joins me from Washington, D.C. Nikunj, over to you.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome to the viewers of NDTV World and NDTV. And as always, ritualistically, I tell Xavier to move his camera. Xavier, move your camera to the Blair House. And that's where, ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister currently is lodged. Blair House, almost the state guest house of the Washington, D.C., of the White House, in the precincts of White House itself, some meters away. That's the security detail for the Prime Minister. And that's where, close to that, that's where the top of the line lineup for the Prime Minister is lined up for today. First to meet him would be the second top-ranking intelligence official from the Trump administration after the DNI, whom Prime Minister met yesterday, moments after he landed in the snowed-out capital of the United States of America. Tulsi Gabbard, the National Security Advisor, would be there shortly, meeting the Prime Minister, intelligence czar of the American community, and also much of the International Committee of Nations, a crucial player because of the intelligence sharing. Then the big man in the Trump administration, not officially so much, but otherwise somebody who rallied behind Mr. Trump during his entire campaign, particularly the latter stages of the campaign. Mr. Elon Musk, boss of Tesla, somebody known to the world as the technology czar, somebody who has innovated immensely on the technology, something that India would also want to do at various stages. And then Vivek Ramaswamy, again a great supporter of the Donald Trump campaign. Those are the individuals lined up. Those are the top of the line individuals lined up from the administration and non-administration side to meet up with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi before he enters the White House sometime post-lunch. And I am now joined by a very distinguished panel outside the White House. And you can see that that's the big house. Currently, the view a bit obstructed by the ramparts of what was a platform created for the inauguration of the American president. Otherwise, the big house in the White House, in the city of D.C., quite clearly visible from Lafayette Park. And the first and the opening comments on this go to the lady there. Jessica, please kindly start. Your opening remarks.
So Voice of America was just on the National Security Council press call for senior administration officials to talk to American reporters covering this administration and this important visit. And what we really took away from that interaction with Trump administration officials was that there is a really positive relationship between these two leaders. In fact, senior administration officials calling this the most important relationship in the 21st century, the most important bilateral relationship in the 21st century, looking for concessions on trade. They did not mention the word tariffs, even though they were asked repeatedly, because we've seen that announcement from President Trump this morning on Truth Social, indicating that he would be placing reciprocal tariffs on trading partners today. But what we did hear is an emphasis on fair trade. And so that's almost synonymous, right, with the concept of reciprocity, win-win, and something that the Trump administration has said they want from their trading partners. So we're looking at how that will be rolling out in terms of U.S.-India trade. Obviously, pharmaceuticals, gems, minerals, and oils, big parts of the India-U.S. trade. And energy and defense purchases is really the prescription that the Trump administration says they will be giving to Modi and his team. This is how you can decrease the deficit, which, of course, is twice as big as it was in the last Trump administration between these two trading partners. It's at $46 billion, and they want to shrink it. That is a big metric for Donald Trump, and I know my colleague here at CSIS has a lot to say about energy, but certainly that's going to be a big focus of the talks.
The fact of the matter is that completely gels into what I have been saying right from the time I landed on this place, that we are placing way too much importance on tariffs. I mean, this relationship over the last 20 years that I have watched it grow myself, and I've been to DC on multiple occasions during that period, completely bipartisan consensus on both sides, not only in the United States of America, but also in India, in maintaining a strong, robust, ever-growing partnership with the United States of America, has moved far beyond all these minus some 100 million tariff here, some 100 million tariff there. This relationship today, as many neutral observers see, is actually a force for global good. And Aparna, another lady there, Bhavna, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, but would you agree with that?
I think it's a strategic partnership between the two countries, which is far more comprehensive across. So tariff is one of the things on the negotiation table. I think what's going to be relevant is the personal relationship between the two leaders. And it's going to be widespread across, trade is one of the tools. Tariff is one of the tools that's going to be relevant for trade negotiations and conversation. But what's going to be more strategic is economic security and technology relationship between the two countries, and that is what I think is going to be prioritized as we look at it. India just announced, with France, partnership pact on AI, which I think is going to also be reflected on today when US and India have a conversation on what the strategic partnership in technology, innovation, and private capital unlocking would look like. So I think it's going to be far more comprehensive than just looking at tariffs as one of the mechanisms, and it's going to be a trade-off, right, between the two countries, because Trump administration is looking at quick wins, right, and I think it's going to be a bouquet of trade-offs between the two countries across sectors, including energy and more U.S. investments in India, but also Indian investments in the U.S. So that's how I see it.
And Mr. Slater there, Managing Director of Capstone. Since you master in predicting the future of the relationship, the trajectories of the relationship, what is your prediction for Indo-US relationship, and how do you see it currently poised? Do you see it at a juncture where it is all set? Remember, in the past 2 decades or so, it has been elevated twice, this relationship. Last time in 2020, during President Trump's first term. Do you think that this is now poised at a level, at a juncture, at a place where it can only move forward and there are only very few headwinds to push it backwards? Do you agree with that?
I think it was good news to hear today that folks in the Trump administration were saying that they view this as the most important bilateral relationship in the 21st century. That continues the rhetoric of the prior administration that talked about it as the most consequential relationship of the 21st century. That's a good framing for this, and I think it puts a good foot forward. At the same time, there are challenges. I do think that announcing reciprocal tariffs or announcing that you're going to make an announcement about reciprocal tariffs less than 24 hours after Prime Minister Modi arrives in the United States is surprising, and it's not something that you would have seen prior administrations do. And so, I think President Trump has signaled that he's not going to be do business like other leaders have done in the past, and so you're going to have to adapt to that. But looking forward in the relationship, I agree. The Trump administration has said that energy sales and purchases of U.S. armaments are one way to balance the trade deficit. But on the armaments side, the past has always been about whether the United States would give India cutting-edge technology. And so the real question is, will the United States do that if India expresses interest? And I think this yields a larger point about where are we going on AI and semiconductor cooperation. This really is, I think as Bhavna was hinting at, the future of the relationship. And it's where India needs to be a player if it wants to revive its growth and grow at 8% to become a developed country by 2047, which is the Prime Minister's goal. And so to do that, they really do need access to cutting-edge chips. I think that is a discussion that's probably happening behind the scenes. I'm not sure that we'll necessarily hear about it on this visit, but it is something that I think the two sides are really talking about as India seeks to ramp up its semiconductor ecosystem and is looking to the United States for technological support in doing that.
And as we speak, the American National Security Advisor, Mr. Waltz, has arrived there at the Blair House. If Xavier can once again take the cameras there to meet the Prime Minister. I can see a sudden amount of rush there, sudden amount of all of a sudden hectic activity. The first meeting between the new American National Security Advisor and the apex of the Indian political leadership taking place there. Second meeting in a row now after the Prime Minister met the American Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, yesterday night once he landed in the DC. Coming back to my panelists, the fact that the Trump administration, as a friend there says, that look, tariffs is part of a combination of tools or a combination of factors that needs to be dealt with in terms of ensuring that it's a fair trade on both sides. It's just one of the tools. Do you think that the entire trajectory of the relationship, given the fact that DC is still that capital which can actually influence not only just the height and technology transfers, which is much required for us to transform a large chunk of our population's life, but also the capital inflows may not be direct US capital inflows so much, but as a signaling to the world, and then ensuring free capital inflows into America. Do you think that kind of signaling and that kind of movement forward is possible post these meetings with the Prime Minister right in the very beginning of this administration?
Well, I think this is a very important meeting that's taking place. It's terrific that India is prioritizing the relationship and vice versa. India is only the fourth country's leader to meet with President Trump. This relationship has grown so dramatically over the years on a bipartisan basis, dating back to the late 1990s. You see a trade right now at the forefront of some of the discussion, questions about tariffs being a one-size-fit-all approach to solving problems for the administration. But the reality is, and this administration appreciates it, that the relationship covers, all fields of human endeavor. First and foremost, there's a compelling...
That's a very interesting way you put it, It covers all fields of human endeavor. I mean, that's probably the way that one should see a relationship of this magnitude, this nature, and of this importance.
No, that's absolutely right. It's panoramic, it's all-encompassing, and that's why I think you're hearing administration officials saying that it's the most consequential, the most significant relationship potentially of the 21st century for the United States. First and foremost, there's a clear and compelling strategic logic to the partnership. It's about achieving a balance in Asia and ensuring no one country dominates that region's future. And so India has an important role to play in that. And we've seen that with the elevation of defense cooperation in the relationship, sharing of technology. We've been talking about AI and semiconductors here. All of that is part of building India's capacity, building up its capabilities and helping it, partnering with India to achieve its full potential. And that's, I think, what's on display here over the day's worth of meetings.
Helping India achieve its full potential. Yeah. Of course, that's one subset, and that's an important subset. But India comes into this relationship with some very unique strengths that are there with only India. Yeah. And that is, as I've been saying, more than anything else, ethical strengths also. India as a country has never ever been an aggressor we have faced aggression, we have faced them robustly, but we have never been an aggressor, so to say. We have always extremely responsibly used any kind of high-end defense technology, never allowed any kind of illegal proliferation. There is not a single allegation against us of stealing of IPRs, even when the tech transfers have taken place, and none of the negative blots that many other countries in the world have faced. So from that position of ethical strength, human ingenuity, and of course, in terms of IT and IT-enabled services, India has been a powerhouse. So you think that India comes to this partnership with unique strengths that only India has?
I think it does, and I think it goes back to the point you made right at the beginning, that the relationship has grown over past 20, 25 years steadily and incrementally. So it's not a relationship which started with a bang and just fizzled away. So that shows what priority the US administration has put behind understanding how India operates, because it's not easy to understand how India operates because of the complexities. You also see recently when Prime Minister talks about artificial intelligence, and it's good for humanity, and the fact that there should be rules-based system to govern AI. Even in defense relationship has only increased in past 20 years. So these are, I would say, a sign of proof that India is an ethical country. It follows there is a rule of law. As you mentioned, there is no transgression, no stealing of IPR, and that's why it's also taking time for technology transfer to happen, right? Because you need to. US understands India has those safeguards and railguards in the process, but it takes time, and that's why it takes time, because you're going through the due process in this case. That also is a strength, I think, because both are big democracies. There is accountability measures on both sides, I would say, and this relationship is going nowhere but further north from here. And I think that's what the importance both countries have placed when Prime Minister is here right in the beginning. Even when the US government is still to staff, a lot of positions are still vacant, confirmations are going on. Both leaders are meeting and kind of, in a way, setting a roadmap for next 4 years. It's President Trump's final term in the office for 4 years, Prime Minister's third term ends in 29. So, it's a co-terminus. So it's beneficial that both leaders meet right at the beginning and decide how they're going to engage in next 4 to 5 years.
Can I just add something?
Yes,
on this?
and you have the most interesting input of the day. Something that completely, everyone feels vindicated when inputs back.
Sure.
Everyone feels, all of us as human beings feel vindicated when inputs back our claims. As I've been saying from the word go, that this is much beyond tariffs, and we should not look at this entire relationship at all from the prism of tariffs.
Yeah, let me get to that, because I think one other thing that was really important to hear from Trump administration officials is the comment that they're still very committed to the IMEC, and that they see that in the broader context of making good on the Abraham Accords. And of course, this is very important to India as it's trying to become the leader of the global South. And at one point, some analysts had really been concerned, was Trump going to try to take the reins again of the Quad, of some of these other international organizations that India and the United States are a part of. And I think what this could be read as is that the U.S. sees India as a partner for these strategic goals, not only bringing harmony, as they said today, and peace in parts of the world, including the Middle East, which is an astonishing goal that obviously they're very dedicated to, but which has eluded people for decades, but also countering China, which is really motivating many people in the Trump administration. It's almost exclusively staffed by China hawks. And so I think you're going to see India play a bigger role in the strategic ambitions of the United States when it comes to China as well.
We have never seen ourselves, India has never seen ourselves as a country which will act as a bulwark against a particular power or B particular power. We have always the traditional nature of Indian politics and traditional consensus in Indian politics has been that we have to be a completely independent of any strategic alliances also. That's why we are part of no strategic alliance. If this position changes in some years to come, I can't say that, but traditionally we have never been a party to any kind of strategic alliances, and we have maintained a completely non-aligned, so to say, posture thus far as far as relationship with other countries go. In fact, when Quad was also taking shape, our External Affairs Minister said that Quad is actually a force for global good. It is not aimed at countering a particular country or any particular geography. So how do you think, this divergence of goals, as Jessica was putting it, there's a divergence of goals, and that would always remain when it comes to such big and humongous countries, geographies. How do you think that takes this divergence still continues while this relationship moves ahead?
You know, when I just moved back to the United States in September after living in New Delhi for 5 years, and I saw the approach to strategic autonomy very close up. And it's true that I think, India takes a very interest-based approach, while at the same time...
As we speak, the shots of, the pictures, the first pictures of the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the U.S. National Security Advisor are now on our screens, and I would request Mrs. Slater to carry on and talk a bit about that as well.
Sure. I think it's actually quite poignant that this is coming up right now, the images on the screen, because this is really the issue, right? Michael Waltz is going to be talking with the Prime Minister about ways that the two countries can work together through the Quad and other mechanisms to promote a free, open, and peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. And so I think, yes, it's true that there isn't an approach necessarily that targets one nation, but there is a joint approach around a certain set of values and a certain outcome that the two countries want to see in the Indo-Pacific region. And I do think that they share, along with several other countries like Japan and Australia, a view about what is the threat to that outcome and how they can work together to achieve it. And so I think it was very telling very early on in the Trump administration, the day after, for example, Secretary of State Rubio got confirmed, that the Quad foreign ministers met here in Washington, D.C., and they agreed that India would indeed host a Quad Leaders Summit later this year, and that Prime Minister Modi is one of the first leaders that President Trump is meeting after his inauguration. And so I think it bodes very well for cooperation between the United States and India on strategic matters in the Indo-Pacific region, and that the Quad will be a leader in that area. And so I expect that's what the Prime Minister and National Security Advisor Waltz are talking about right now.
And that can, of course, be one aspect of the National Security Advisor's meeting with the Prime Minister. But we have to always keep in mind that India has always been very, very keen in terms of real-time intelligence sharing. Remember, our neighborhood is one of the most treacherous neighborhoods. Pakistan, they are right next to our frontiers, global epicenter of terrorism, and then there is Afghanistan. So we always face real-time threats as far as terror is concerned. And India has always been keen that the American prowess of intelligence gathering at least gleans some India-specific intelligence and passes it on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, which is where we go back to the earlier point on technology exchange. I think it's very relevant to defense cooperation, to the national security, regional security. And I think as the conversation happened today, it is necessary for strategic but also long-term perspective of the region, and which I think is going to be prioritized as we discuss. The two leaders are meeting because it is critical. I think technology is the larger theme, which also leads into not only economic security but also regional security. Yeah.
And the challenges with the National Security Advisor, remember, our challenges on the security front are multifarious. Yeah. From our eastern frontiers of China to the western front of Pakistan, and then there is a whole host and hues of non-state actors that continue to target our national security interests, not only in India, but also abroad, sometimes now seen as far as Canada and sometimes on the US soil as well.
I think you rightly pointed out the national security is a challenge, and we saw that the emphasis that both governments have placed on this, even in the Biden administration, a lot of initiatives, very close initiatives between national security advisors on both sides. And in a way, security is driving a big part of this relationship. Yeah, whether you talk about energy, whether it's clean energy, conventional energy, AI, technology transfer, everything is linked with happens within the broader umbrella of NSC. So it will be interesting to see how the ISET, which is the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies between two countries, shape up in the today's meeting between President and Prime Minister of India.
And my final question to you, when we talk of the National Security Advisors meeting with the Prime Minister, I know when it comes to a country like United States, the security is not the security in the traditional sense, and the National Security Advisor is probably not only dealing with the security threats which are direct and almost in your face, but there are a lot of latent threats in the domain of cyber security, threats in the domain of digital infrastructure, threats that are now emerging via the AI capabilities, and those AI capabilities going public is the next big step. So all of those discussions also paramount and critical for India.
Oh, absolutely. I think discussions on cybersecurity, maintaining the integrity of software systems, applications, establishing the rules of the road in those areas, the rules of the road on artificial intelligence. The Prime Minister had a key role in the summit that took place in Paris on that topic. I think all of those will feature. There'll also be discussions on maritime security in the region, how to address various contingencies, how to collaborate, be a force of good in the Quad. I think all of those things will feature. There will also be discussions on next steps in building the defense partnership going forward. What does that look like? Where are we on key sales, co-production efforts, areas like combat ground systems, military jet engines. And so there's going to be a lot of issues that are discussed in this growing strategic partnership.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for not only commenting in so great detail about this most consequential relationship of democracies, at least as I see it, and as we see it from India, but also braving extreme cold of Washington, D.C. with me. And with that, thank you very much. And back to you, Maria, and the studios in Delhi.
All right, Nikunj, we'll keep coming back to you because that's where all the action is unfolding. I am being joined by Ambassador Kaval Sibbal, someone who has been Indian ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France, and Russia. Ambassador Sibbal, let's talk about these visuals. Two critical meetings that have happened. This is happening even as we speak. National Security Advisor in the new Trump administration calling on Prime Minister Modi. And previously, last night, in fact, there was that meeting which happened between Director of Intelligence, which is Tulsi Gabbard. What do you think will be the outcome of these meetings?
These are preparatory meetings, get to know each other. And both these individuals are very positive towards India. They have shown their commitment to India over a long period of time. And they are an asset for us. In the case of the new Director of National Intelligence, Modi would have certainly laid out his concerns about terrorism and about threats to our security emanating from U.S. soil, the Khalistani movement, which needs to be controlled. Plus, in general, more intelligence cooperation between the two countries, which exists on the ground, but now we can expect it to be strengthened further, and this can be very, very helpful. We have concerns about some of the activities of the United States previous administration in our periphery, especially in Bangladesh, and therefore there would be also good scope for talking about our concerns in this regard about stabilizing our periphery and the role that the U.S. could play in sharing intelligence with regard to terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism growing in this region, the situation on the ground in Afghanistan, what's happening in Pakistan. Now, all these things couldn't have been discussed in this get-to-know meeting, but these are the concerns we have, and some general reference would have been made to these concerns. With the National Security Advisor, apart from these general concerns, the most important thing would be the ICET. This was a very, very major step that was taken by both sides, including Indus X, in order to open doors for technology cooperation between the two countries in critical and emerging technologies. There is, independently of the China threat in these areas, the need for India and the United States to mutually work together to expand their own capacities in this area. But the Chinese threat makes this cooperation even more urgent, because it's quite clear that China has gained a great deal of advance, even in some areas, over the United States. And therefore, United States and India can work together, and India can offer its technological manpower and its expertise and its human potential. The kind of scale that we can offer to the United States is tremendous. I mean, the number of Indians who are working on artificial intelligence is the largest in the world. And look at the design the designing of the some of the technologies that are done in India, especially semiconductors. Most of the designing is being done in India. And it's American firms that are getting the maximum advantage out of it. And there is, of course, the whole issue of artificial intelligence. Now, why I'm saying this is that earlier the National Security Advisor of the United States and the National Security Advisor of India were co-chairing this initiative.
Yes.
And it is important that the White House takes ownership of this under the new administration, even though I understand they might rebrand it and call it by different names so as it does not appear that it is a legacy issue of the Biden administration about which the new administration is very sensitive. So it's a very important meeting in terms of, as I said, get to know each other and have exchange in terms of what are the broad perspectives both sides have about the relationship going forward.
Okay. Ambassador Sibal, let's address the big T in the newsroom, or should I say in the room here, the question regarding tariffs. Do you think the two world leaders will really discuss that in that bilateral, which is going to happen in a few minutes from now in the White House? Or do you think they will leave it to their ministers, to trade ministers to discuss that?
My guess is that Trump, being the kind of person he is, he doesn't mince his words. He's very blunt and he's very demanding and he doesn't believe in diplomatic niceties. This doesn't mean that he's going to bludgeon our Prime Minister with his tariff demands, but I think it will be brought into the conversation. But from our side, we will try and give it a constructive look by saying that we are open to the idea of finding a solution to this issue where both sides gain, that we lower our tariffs to American products, for American products, and in your case, since you are our biggest single country trade partner and we have a lot of equities in this area, that we should also look at the possibilities of expanding our exports to the United States. And therefore, as has been said, we will look in terms of a possible trade deal and sign it by the time President Trump comes to India for the Quad Summit in later this year in autumn.
All right, Ambassador Sibal, pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for your time here on NDTV. A quick break, and this remains our top focus. We will be joined by Harsh Shringla, the former Indian ambassador to United States, for his views on this crucial bilateral which is happening between India and US. Prime Minister Modi's day in Washington, D.C. has begun. In fact, the first crucial meeting, which is a call-on that has come in from the National Security Advisor of the new Donald Trump administration, Michael Waltz, is happening. The first set of pictures have come in as well. And let me bring in Harsh Shringla, former Indian ambassador to United States and Bangladesh. Ambassador Shringla, appreciate your time. How does this visit redefine India's positioning in the evolving global order, especially in the context of US-China tensions?
So if you look at the fact that within 25 days of taking office, President Trump has invited Prime Minister Modi to Washington, D.C., is a very strong indication of the priority that the US attaches to the relationship and vice versa. And I think being one of the first global leaders to meet President Trump in his second term in office, which has already been a very, very, I would say, newsworthy, momentous sort of period in which he has passed so many executive orders that impinge not only on America, but on the rest of the world, I think that meeting becomes very important. And one of the main, I think, endeavors of both the leaders would be to establish, not only to re-establish that personal connect that existed under Trump 1.0, but also to look at how to take the next steps in our strategic partnership. And as you mentioned, one of the areas that we would like to look at is a worldview in terms of what is happening globally. President Trump has been very invested in bringing an end to conflicts in the Middle East and Europe. And in that context, Prime Minister Modi's position is already known. that this is not an era of conflict, that we must work towards peace through dialogue and diplomacy. So there's a very strong convergence between these two leaders that we see. And I think a lot of the conversation will be about how the United States and India can coordinate their positions and work together in that endeavor, how we can supplement the efforts that President Trump is doing now and in a post-conflict scenario. And we can, as Prime Minister Modi says, work together to make the world a better place. So I think that is going to be one of the foremost priorities of that visit and the meeting.
This meeting is coming in the backdrop of two critical developments. First, Donald Trump calling India tariff king and also saying that it's a big abuser of trade ties. And his administration is about to sign an executive order vis-a-vis reciprocal tariffs. And also the deportation which happened of Indians, they were handcuffed and the larger concern shackled and chained. The questions of inhuman deportation has come up. How should India deal with these?
Well, we've been very receptive to US interests, and especially keeping in mind President Trump's priority to send illegal immigrants back. We have, I think, agreed to take back those illegal immigrants who have been who have been proven to be of Indian origin, of Indian citizens. In other words, their documents have been verified, they're proven to be Indians, and they are coming back home. And in that context, I think it's important to convey to President Trump that, look, while we are fully with you in your endeavor to send back illegal immigrants, but at the same time, it's very important to understand that they have to come back in dignity and not, in a manner that is, detrimental to their dignity or their interests. And I think that is very important. So the objectives are the same. It's just a question of how they come back. And I know that, given the relationship that exists between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, and the respect that President Trump, the personal respect that he has for Prime Minister Modi, he will definitely listen to a very, very useful and constructive suggestion that, look, we will continue to meet your objectives, but it has to be done in a manner that is consistent with our own requirements. I think that's not hard to get across, and I think Prime Minister Modi will convince President Trump that this is the way to send back illegal immigrants from the United States.
Yes, and defense cooperation particularly has emerged as a key instrument of India-US strategic partnership. Donald Trump has also suggested that India should increase its defense procurement. Are you of the opinion that there could be some signals on those lines?
So whether it is, the issue of tariffs, or whether it's the issue of illegal immigrants, or whether it's the issue of defense purchases, I have always maintained, given our past experience with President Trump, that our policy should be both proactive and preemptive. And in a certain sense, we have, because we have already announced some reductions in tariffs that impact on the US, on US exports to India. I'm sure that Prime Minister Modi will suggest other cuts that would accommodate US interests in areas like medical devices and equipment, or electronic equipment, or chemicals. But the important, and of course, area of defense acquisitions, and we ourselves are looking for quality equipment to supplement, our armed forces who are doing a very commendable job in two different fronts. But the fact of the matter is that, that also is an area that we can, I think, cooperate on in terms of providing more, let's say, looking at how we can access better US equipment in the defense realm, and at the same time, look at other areas that can, to some extent, reduce the adverse trade balance that the US has with India. In other words, India enjoys, a surplus trade of between $35 and $46 billion with the US. And the endeavor would be to try and balance that trade to the extent that we can. And that can happen, as I said, through enhanced defense purchases, enhanced purchases of oil and gas, some market access to US products that are in very, very specific areas, as I mentioned, And finally, of course, also areas like new areas like nuclear energy. And we are looking for advanced modular reactors or small modular reactors. These are areas where the US has technology, US has expertise. And I think we should invite them to manufacture and to get into co-production, joint production with us in these areas.
Personal bonhomie or personal connect between the two leaders, Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi, has almost been the driving force of the bilateral or equations or relationship between the two nations. Despite the bonhomie, what are the underlying friction points, according to you, in the India-US relationship, and how do you think it will be addressed?
Well, I mean, I would say this is a relationship that is based on broad convergences that both countries enjoy. And those convergences are, based on our strategic interests, shared strategic interests, and that will continue irrespective. So there are always minor issues that have to be dealt with in any relationship. There's no relationship that doesn't have issues. And with a relationship as comprehensive and as extensive as the India-US relationship, there are bound to be some issues that come on the table. At this point of time, we have a number of such, issues, whether it is on the issue of tariffs, whether it's in the issue of immigrants, illegal immigration, whether it's in the issue of defense purchases. I mean, these are not even irritants. They're just those issues that have to be discussed by the two sides, and we have to find a way that, that meets both interests and we move forward. That's what it is. And I think it can be done. I mean, as I said, given Prime Minister Modi's connect, given the respect that President Trump has for Prime Minister Modi, these issues can be easily, taken care of and taken forward. That's my sense. And I am sure that we will see a very constructive, very positive level of exchanges in the first meeting between the two principals under Trump 2.0. And that relationship, the India-US relationship, is poised to move forward significantly in the next 4 years of the term of office of both Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, which coincides, which is not always the case in the India-US relationship.
Yes, absolutely, Ambassador, because, Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump are two strongman leaders who have almost, shared perceptions of a number of issues, including China and radical Islam, threatening the very world order. Coming to my last question to you, the previous US administration and multiple agencies in US have been very critical of India on human rights or the functioning of democratic institutions. Do you think that will feature somewhere in these discussions?
Well, I think, the Republicans in general and President Trump in particular tend to view the relationship from a broad perspective of strategic convergence. And they don't sweat the small stuff, as they say. I think they will be focused on the large picture, how to collaborate with a major partner like India on a global and regional basis, and of course, bilateral basis. And I think that will be the focus of the relationship. We will see far less of those minor irritants that have cropped up in the later part of President Biden's term. Mind you, President Biden also realized the importance of the relationship. He kept these irritants out. It's only in the later part of his tenure that these started creeping in and became a bit of an irritant in the relationship. But I don't see much of that under President Trump's term. There could be one or two issues that might come up. I mean, religious freedoms is something that the US takes seriously, and President Trump has a strong base there. So this may come up, but these are not make or break issues, and they're not going to mar the relationship or even come in as irritants in the relationship. I don't envisage that happening.
Ambassador Shringla, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Shifting focus now to Arun Kumar, former ambassador of India to United States. Ambassador Kumar, how significant is this visit in strengthening India-US relationship, especially in the context of global geopolitics?
No, I think it's certainly very, very significant because the Indian Prime Minister is going to the US within the first month after the inauguration of President Trump. And that's unusual. If you remember in 2021, he had gone in June, about 6 months after President Trump had been inaugurated. And if you look at series of visitors that the president has had the Indian Prime Minister would be the fourth visitor at the level of head of state or government. You had the Israeli Prime Minister, the Japanese Prime Minister, King of Jordan, and now the Indian Prime Minister. So it's a signal from the US that they attach value to the India relationship. And more than that, if you see the broad messaging related to what are the areas of priority for the US, one is clearly West Asia. So you have the Prime Minister of Israel, King of Jordan, and second is clearly the Indo-Pacific. You have the Prime Minister of Japan, now the Prime Minister of India. So that's a broad geopolitical signaling coming out. And second, I think at a time when the US itself is going through a major disruption, and as you see from all the reports, domestically, there's a lot of disruption happening. Administratively, there's a lot of disruption happening politically. And in terms of their foreign policy posture, it's a new US. They want to engage less internationally. They talk more and more openly of America first, of a transactional approach to diplomacy. And so given that, it is important that the Indian Prime Minister and the US President, right at the beginning, have a direct discussion on how they want to work this relationship. And if things turn out well, it sends a message to all those in the new incoming administration, because there's a whole lot of change happening in terms of the incoming administration. So it's a message to everybody that President Trump attaches importance to the relationship, and therefore they will approach the relationship with India in that context. So given all that, I think it's very important that the visit is happening early in his tenure.
All right. The US is India's largest destination for merchandise exports and accounting for more than 18% in values. And if I were to share one more statistics with you, India exported goods worth $77.5 billion to the US in 2023-2024. There is this sense that there is that trade imbalance. That's what US has been highlighting. How do you think the two nations will be navigating that point?
At one level, one can argue that India's trade surplus with the US is not very significant. It's about $35 billion. China's trade surplus with the US is more than $350 billion. So that's a real problem. But still, India figures in the top 10 countries with which US has a trade deficit. So from that point of view, they got a certain focus. And even in his first term, Trump had repeatedly said that he feels that the tariffs that are there in India, the import tariffs, are high. They're much higher than the kind of tariffs that the US imposes on the products that are of export interest to India. And he wants to balance that out. In his first term, the two countries had made an attempt to do a limited trade agreement, but that didn't work out. It could not be finalized. So that's something that I think they remember from the experience of the first term. So we can expect there will be a push from the US for India to reduce its trade surplus with the United States and to deal with this issue of difference in the kind of tariffs they're imposing on products of export interest to us and products of export interest to the United States. So from the messaging that is coming out so far from the Indian government, some of the public comments, it is clear that India is planning to buy more energy from the US. This was something that had been started in the first term of President Trump. It's also possible that India may buy more defense equipment from the US. So with these additional purchases, I think some of the trade surplus that India has would come down. And also, I think perhaps the two countries will start exploring the possibility of another limited trade agreement. Now, if you do a limited trade agreement, then you have the potential to reduce tariffs on products of export interest to the US without having to reduce it for all your other partners, because then it will be WTO consistent. So I think that could be one approach. But in the interim, one can't rule out that the US may talk of raising tariffs on some products of export interest to India. And India will have to see how to respond to that.
Ambassador Kumar, last question to you. How dependable is Mr. Trump? We have seen the larger worldview around him has been that he is transactional in nature. But because this bonhomie or relationship between the two nations is driven by personal equations, my question is, how dependable is he?
There's been an element of, from India's point of view, an element of unpredictability with all US presidents. Because ultimately, No country takes a decision to help another country. They take a decision based on their interest and the political interests of their leaders. Now, where there is convergence, you work together. So as a result, they will take decisions where you feel it doesn't work for your interest. Now, if I look at the Biden administration, for example, they did the initiative on critical and emerging technologies, which was a path-breaking and transformative initiative for the India-US relationship. And at the same time, they withdrew from Afghanistan in 2021, looking at their interests, not mindful of consequences on security interests of others in the region. So similarly, we have to watch how is President Trump defining US national interests. Second, how is he defining his own political interests? And so we can anticipate the decisions he will take or the articulation he will do based on that assessment. And we have to work around that. And where the convergence is not there, we take action to protect our interests. And where there's convergence, you work together. So some areas there will be convergence, some areas it will not be there. And we have to accept it and be prepared for it.
All right, Ambassador Arun Kumar, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. In few minutes from now, another crucial and perhaps the big highlight, one of the big highlights of this meeting of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington, D.C. will happen. Elon Musk will be heading to Blair House, where that meeting with Prime Minister Modi will happen. That remains our top focus at this hour. Quick break and the news and updates will continue.